Welcome to the Keeping It Teal podcast. We are the CCU sports podcast that truly keeps it teal 24/7. I'm your host, Hunter Santiago, and I'm joined today by my two co-hosts, AJ Moran and Jay Largent. Teal Nation, this is officially the Chaunting hour. We played a ball game against JMU that feels like our team didn't even show up to play. Something that we're going to talk about later in the podcast, but between the JMU game and everything that's transpired today on Wednesday, the 29th of November, I want to talk about some more fun stuff. We're going to do stuff a little bit differently today. We're going to start with our pick'ems, talk about winners, and then we'll get into JMU as well as some off-season topics. So, hey, let's get the ball rolling and transition into the Sun Belt pick'ems. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here to crown your 2023 season Sun Belt pick'ems winner, AJ Moran. Just a little round of applause. Maybe we'll add in post some claps, but congrats, AJ. He finished the season 28-15 with a 3-4 record in his last week, so not a good record to finish out, but he managed to win. He beat me by 1 point as I finished 27-16, and then Jay won below me, so only 2 below AJ. 26-17. It was real close. AJ didn't blow us all out, but at the end of the day, AJ's a winner. He won the Sun Belt Pick'ems. It's not easy, so congratulations, AJ. It was fun. Excited to see if AJ can win the crown in back-to-back seasons as the Keeping It Teal podcast will pick the Sun Belt Pick'ems again next season. We will now transition over to the Sun Belt Conference Championship picks. I'm just going to break them down real quick, then announce the winner. I picked Coastal versus ULL. Obviously, it's Troy versus App State, so I'm not even close. Jay picked Georgia State versus Texas State. Once again, not even close. And AJ picked Georgia Southern versus Troy. He has one of the two teams in the championship and picked Troy to win. So not only has AJ won, but he also has a chance to be an outright winner outside of not picking the East right if Troy wins. So regardless, AJ wins. It'll be exciting to see. If Troy does win, then he wins by even more technically. So congratulations, AJ Moran, on winning both. And you know what? I'm going to do something unscripted. I'm going to give AJ a quick chance to speak on his double Sun Belt victories right here.
Yeah, so normally I'd be tooting my own horn, but I'm going to stay humble this time a little bit. It's a matter of circumstance, I think, a little bit. Like you said, I won on a cop-out with the Sun Belt Championship picks a little bit, with Troy, and then obviously nobody could guess the East. Nobody would have even thought of App State in the conversation, so it just so happened to break down that way. And as far as the pick'ems, it's just, like you said, I had a terrible week, but we all kind of had terrible weeks, partially with us being a little biased on some of the picks. But, it was a lot of fun, I think, this season. And there's definitely more pick'ems where this came from.
Absolutely. Thank you, AJ. So yeah, no, I mean, we're going to do a lot more pick'em style stuff. It's fun for us. It's fun for the viewers. So, hey, no, it's exciting. I'm glad AJ could win 2 times this year. Hopefully he doesn't win our next segment, which is not fully decided yet. So let's shift over to our third set of pick'ems. This was what we call our natty picks. For I think 3 or 4 times we were able to change these picks from when we started back halfway through the college football season this year. And in our last podcast where we changed them, most of us made very slight changes, and we cannot change them anymore as we are getting towards the end. This is conference championship week, so whatever happens, happens. I'm going to read through who we have, and then on our next podcast next week after the conference championship week is over, we'll have an idea of who was close, who was right, and then once the natty is over, we'll know for sure who's the winner. So this is going to be more of a long-standing thing that, sometime in February or late January, we'll be able to kind of go over who truly won this. So I had Ohio State at 1, Washington at 2, Florida State at 3, Alabama at 4, and the winner is Washington. It's not really likely that Ohio State's going to make it. If they do, they definitely won't be 1. So I'm definitely not sitting pretty here, but each of my teams have a chance. Actually, all of our picks technically have a chance. The order is really what it comes down to, plus the winner. Jay has Georgia, then Bama, then Oregon, then Florida State, then Georgia. I think, and we'll get into this as we discuss, but I think having two SEC teams there probably won't pay off for Jay in the long run with how this, playoff predictions looking. AJ has Georgia, Ohio State, Florida State, and Oregon all very likely here, and then Ohio State is the winner. So, guys, how are we feeling? Let's start with Jay. How are we feeling about these picks going into the conference championship week?
I'm feeling pretty good. I mean, I just can't pick two SEC teams, what's going to happen. One of these teams isn't going to be where I want them, but overall, my picks are in good shape going into championship weekend.
Alrighty, what about you, AJ? How are you feeling about your picks leading in the conference championship week for the Natty Pick'ems?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little uneasy. I think this is actually like one of the most complicated like conference championship weeks that college football playoff has had. There's a lot of one-loss teams, and it's like this conference championship week is going to decide a lot on how it all shakes down. I think Georgia again, they could if they lose this week, there's a shot they might not even get in just based on their strength of schedule, right? So that one's a tough one. Ohio State, they lost to Michigan, so now they basically are sitting on the sidelines hoping other people lose to maybe to get in. Florida State had lost their quarterback Jordan Travis in a big time injury again, so that they can still win and find their way in. But obviously, that's not ideal for them playing with a backup quarterback. And then I described Oregon as they have to win this week, beat Washington, and hopefully that's enough to push them in. And like I said, there's a lot of one-loss teams on the border, right? Your Alabamas, if they beat Georgia, is that good enough to get them in as a one-loss team, right? If Texas beats Oklahoma State this weekend, does that get them in as a one-loss team? Right? There's a lot of interesting combinations of what could happen here, and I'm interested to see how it all shakes down.
Alrighty, so that concludes our segment for our Natty Picks. We'll talk more about this next week and pretty much every other week leading into the national championship. All right, the dreaded time for our Keeping It Teal podcast, episode 7, begins now. Let's get into our James Madison review. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Our offense looked inept. I don't even know what's more depressing. The loss last year, the JMU on the road where we had guests starting, or the loss this year when we were told Grayson McCall would be starting and he dressed just for them to cock tease us. That's the easiest way to say it. That's what it was. They teased the fans. They made us think that, oh, he's going to start. There were multiple credible sources, whether it's news related or coastal related, that reported McCall would be starting. And obviously he didn't. He didn't even see a single snap. So it was disappointing. Our defense got off to a beautiful start, I'd say, in the first 8 minutes of the first quarter. And then it started falling apart there defensively and offensively. And one thing I like to say from different people I've talked to since the JMU game, your defense for Coastal this year was pretty good, way better than last year, regardless of what you want to say. Statistically, it's just proven that this defense in most of the games played significantly better than the defense of last year. The issue is, yeah, they put up 56 points against Coastal's defense. Well, at some point, you got to score offensively to give these guys a break to catch a breath. Sure, time of possession was fairly even. That's just because that JMU offense went downfield, constantly scoring really quickly. And then we get the ball back, have a couple 3-and-outs, or we drive down for a little bit, a couple first downs, and then punt. I don't know. It's not looking hot for us offensively. Something's got to change. We'll talk more about that later in the podcast. AJ, what are your initial thoughts and review of the JMU game?
Well, I think that the best way to express my thoughts is going to be this picture right here. You got Pepe here. That was my exact reaction. I think just when you come to realization of what's going on. Yeah, you lose to JMU again. You get smoked at home. And then obviously, as we'll talk about here a little bit later, is now it's the last time we will see some of these guys in the teal uniform on the surf turf. No conference championship, and even worse, now App State gets to play in it, a team that we hate and also we beat in the regular season. All those things is just like, not a very unsettling feeling. To dive deeper into this game and to review it a little bit. Again, the special teams, whatever, they really weren't used. They're kind of relevant in this one. Defense, like you said, when you get murdered in time of possession, there's only so much you could do. However, again, giving up 56 points, I don't care what offense. It could have been Tom Brady playing quarterback. 56 points is tough for any offense to put up. Again, if you're getting murdered in time of possession, I get it. But in 481 total yards, right? It was just they couldn't really stop them. So defense struggled, and the offense struggled as much as the defense did. Again, they were just underwhelming. 3 turnovers, under 100 yards rushing, and they put up 0 points in the first half. We were down. We were losing the game 28-0 at half. Right. Our first drives were punt, turnover on downs, punt, fumble, and that's halftime. So like that was just the way it was going. And you could tell right off the bat the trajectory of this game. It was not pretty. Last year we lost in a similar fashion, but there was a lot of other things to take in consideration. We had a coaching change announced right before, and the team morale was low. And again, it was Jared Guest playing quarterback, and there's a lot of other things factoring in. The game didn't matter at that point because we already clinched the conference championship game. So, there's other things factoring in. Now it was you had to come in, you had to win this game, season on the line basically, and you just got smoked. You got beat on every side of the ball. Pros, none at all. I don't think there's any pro you could take away from that game. And then cons, all of the above, right? It was just one of those games that we got beat in every position group. We got smoked in every position group. They were just better in every way. And that's one of those things that's just, terrible. It's a terrible feeling in that locker room and a terrible feeling for the team. But Jay, what did you see from that game?
Just very disappointing outcome from that game. I mean, the last time I feel for these seniors, their last time on the surf turf, they're going to have to live with this game. And other than that, we were outperformed every position group. I mean, we were down 28-0. I'd say the turning point, in my opinion, was Ethan Vasco on that 4th down pass. He throws out of bounds to Jared Brown when we were deep in JMU territory, and we could have had a chance to go in and get 7 right there, and we didn't. I think that changed the whole game right there. We were defeated from that point on, and I just want to see how the team responds with one more game with this class, these brothers, their last game that they may play on the surf turf or for Coastal in the bowl game coming up. So I'm excited to see where we're heading this postseason.
Let's transition over to our review of the Coastal Carolina staff, Tim Beck and his staff this year. I'll start out. If I had to give them a grade, I'd give them exactly the amount of wins that we had on the season. I'd give this staff a 7 out of 10. Some people might think that's even too high. Number one, I think Tim Beck went out there and he did mostly the best he could do with his staff. I do think he could have done a little bit better with the staff he hired, but his strength coach is an absolute stud, and everybody that I've talked to who's met him has nothing but great things to say about him. Navier, or however you pronounce his last name, our defensive coordinator, he did the best, in my opinion, he could do with what he had. And according to several different subreddits that Jay pointed out to me, he might be on the move to a Power 5 defensive coordinator position. No specific school in mind that I've heard of, but definitely multiple schools are taking a look at him with all these different vacancies at defensive coordinator at the Power 5 level. And then there's Travis Trickett. That probably is the reason that Beck's staff isn't at a 8 or a 9 out of 10, because we went to a bowl game regardless of that awful loss to JMU. We went to a bowl game in his first year as a head coach for Tim Beck. But Travis Trickett, I bet you he's a great man. He seems like a great father from all the posts that he has on social media, but he has made our offense with some of the best receivers, one of the best tight end rooms. I think Likely is, I think all of our tight ends are great, but none of them are Isaiah Likely. But still, the most depth we've ever seen Coastal Carolina wise at the tight end position. Our running back room is still the same. Offensive line might have been not so great, but they listen, they tightened it up pretty well towards the end of the season previous to the Army and JMU game. But yeah, no, I give the staff a 7 out of 10. I give Beck a 7 out of 10. I'd say if anyone needs to get fired, it needs to be Travis Trickett. We need our offense to not be inept next season. Other than that, I'd say if we can keep everybody else and keep moving forward and try to do better, and Beck sees where he might have went wrong with certain aspects and fixes those, that'd be great. We'll talk more about the portal in later segments and what we might need, but we need a quarterback who can kind of inject a lot of, emotion and fuel and leadership. I think Vasco is a really good quarterback, don't get me wrong, especially at the group of 5 level, but we're not looking for, really good. We're looking for fantastic. I know some people might be like, you're crazy. Well, yeah, we've been spoiled from having Grayson McCall. So of course, a lot of people are going to have that expectation, but let's be real. The Sun Belt East is the hardest division at the group of 5 level, and you can't argue it. You cannot argue against it. To win in the Sun Belt East and be in your top 2/3 teams, which we finished 3rd in the East, you got to have a really, really good quarterback. I mean, look at App State's quarterback. He's fairly good. JMU's quarterback is a baller. You got to have guys who can cook at that level. Vasco is definitely one of the better Sun Belt quarterbacks, but I wouldn't put him in the top 5 at the Sun Belt. Is he better than most quarterbacks at Conference USA? More than likely, I'd probably say if he got a full season, he would be. He could go cook there too. I don't necessarily want him to leave, but that's just kind of where I'm at. But we'll talk about that more in a bit. Let's stick on track with staff, and let's move on to AJ. What is your grade for Tim Beck, grade for the staff, opinions on who might need to be fired, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, this one's tough, right? Because as someone that obviously is not coached at this level, but has been a coach at a level at one point, it's always right. Is like sometimes it's just you do all the right things, but sometimes it doesn't show on the field, right, with your personnel and stuff. As far as Tim Beck, I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt here. I'm gonna go like 7.5 probably with him. I think part of it is like the he has to adapt. It is a different brand of football, right? Being an offensive coordinator at NC State and then coming here being now running the show, being the head coach, have to do everything else at a different level, right? You're seeing teams you haven't seen before. You're seeing some different styles of football you haven't seen before. And I think just adapting to that it's a learning curve, and I hope, especially after this JMU game, right, that it's a lesson to him of listen, okay, we played a little bit, right? Okay, you made a bowl game, that's great, you got your bonus, pat on the back, but it's got to be a wake up call if you want to compete, if you want to be relevant in the Sun Belt. We have to get better as a program overall. And again, that's recruiting, that's transfer portal, that's everything. You have to get better as a program because when you played a real Sunbelt team, right, a real contender like we saw on Saturday against James Madison, we got absolutely smoked on every side of the football, right? And again, whatever you want to blame it on, right, use the scapegoat, you can, but at the end of the day, right, they were the better team on Saturday. And again, if you want to be able to compete, if you want to stay relevant, you have to, especially as a head coach, find a way to adapt and find a way to get better. And I hope that's a learning curve from him and he learns his lesson, right? And that he can find a way to not let that happen again. Now, as a coaching staff as a whole, I'm gonna go with maybe like a 6 here. Reason being, again, I like the strength and conditioning coach. I met him personally. Great dude, and super energetic guy, super nice guy, and knows what he's doing. And I also like our defensive coordinator, right? Those are, again, they has been rough defensive games. I know the Army one being part of that. That's again also involves Tim Beck, right? As the head coach, it's your call. It's like you don't prepare for the option. That killed me a little bit. Like, how do you not prepare for the option with Army? Again, I know they haven't been running it, but it's like one of those things that's like whenever you're playing Army, they're running option a little bit, or at least a couple looks, stuff like that. Right. And again, there are some games that we got smoked a little bit. Again, most of it because of time possession. But regardless of how much time you're on the field, again, you have to try to draw up schemes, find ways to get off the field. I know we are struggling with pressure a lot during the season, right? Just when you pressure the quarterback, they make bad decisions. You force those turnovers. And there were sometimes we didn't do that effectively. And then, like I said, the offensive coordinator to me, I think, is the biggest flaw. Again, it's not that I don't think Trinkett's a great guy, right? Again, he's someone that I've met as well. But it's just, to me, I was scratching my head. Again, this is also a Tim Beck. It goes on him as well, as to what we were doing weeks 1 through like 5. Right? It's like, you go to UCLA, it's like, okay, whatever. We that was a somewhat decent game. That was a close game. That is a game on paper we probably should have won. And the reason being because we had they turned the ball over a bunch. It was not their cleanest brand of football, and that was a game that was winnable for us. That was a winnable game. Like I said, but then you played the Jacksonville State, Duquesne, right? And you win those games. Okay, cool. But then you lose to Georgia Southern and Georgia State, and it's with this offense that you're trying to run an offense that it just didn't seem to work. It was lackluster to me. It just didn't seem to work. And again, this falls on Trinket and as well as Tim Beck of like, listen, we gotta make a change here. And they finally started changing things right come that App State game. And then again, that's where your season turned around. We were having the conversation that we didn't think this team was even going to make a bowl game, right? At one point in time, we were like, fire everybody. We're not making a bowl game, and we have the best probably roster skill-wise that we've ever had. So it's scary for a while. And again, the reason why I'm leaning into him a little bit is just because as a coach, your job is to do what's right by your players, right? Like you might specialize in a certain thing. You might be really good at coaching a certain thing, but at the same time, you're going to, create schemes, create plays that get your playmakers the ball that put your players in a position for success. That I like to use the Miami Dolphins example, right? Is like if you saw Tua throwing goal line fades to Tyreek Hill, you'd probably be scratching your head saying, "What the heck are they doing?" Right? Just because that team is not built for goal line fades and like smash mouth football. That's not what they're built for. What they are built for is speed. So what do? They draw up schemes and they create plays in order, right, for those speedy guys to get open, right? A lot of stuff in the open field, a lot of just, hey, let me just get the ball in somebody's hands and let them go, right? And let them run and see if they can even catch them, right? That's what they do. That's what they specialize in. That's why they're so good, right? Again, it's if you could have been throwing goal line fades because that's what you know, but if you're throwing it to Tyreek Hill again, you're gonna sit there scratching your head like, why, like, what are they doing? And that was kind of how I felt in that Georgia Southern Georgia State game. It just felt uncomfortable from where I was watching it. But enough of my rant here. I say overall, again, I am pleased with the coaching staff that they did catch on and they made that adjustment for the rest of the season, right? Is like they could have easily just not made the adjustment, just ride it out or whatever it was, and it could have been very ugly. But they did make an adjustment at one point, so I'll give them props for that. But again, there might be some movement here, so I'm interested to see if Tim Beck and crew learn their lesson, if they're gonna, find a way to get better so that this doesn't happen again, or if they're just gonna mail it in whatever way. But Jay, what do you think about this coaching staff?
Obviously, first things first. I mean, I'm very satisfied with the staff for a first year coming in with bringing in 53 new players, keeping the players that we did. Overall, they did a good job. I'd give them a 7.5 as well. I mean, recruiting, portal, you name it, they were top notch in that. I would also like to point out our tight ends coach, Chris Proctor. I like to give him a 10 out of 10 because he just revamped that whole tight end room. I mean, brought in 4 Power 5 transfers, and I'd say he's our model coach. I would want the whole staff to model after because he put in the work and time, and you can see his position group responded to him. And one thing I want to see changed is I just want to see how Beck and staff, how they redo their in-game adjustments, because I don't think we did that too well this season, and that cost us in some games. And I just want to see if they learn their lesson in the offseason to see, hey, we need to make better adjustments so we can put our players and also our Chanticleers in a better position to come out with some of these wins. Win some of these games that were losses this year.
That's the Keeping It Teals podcast's overall review of Tim Beck and the staff. Each of us kind of have our own thoughts, as you've heard. But, I think overall as a collective, we have a belief that Tim Beck can bounce back next year, take us to another bowl game, give us another record. It's just unfortunate that our next discussion that we're about to segue into is why we're still in the dumps about more than just the JMU game and the staff as a whole. So let's go ahead and jump into it. This next segment is called the Teal Portal. Ladies and gentlemen, now that it's portal season, we have multiple major Chants jumping into the transfer portal. And it's unfortunate. It's expected. It's the world of the group of five that if you have a top talent, it's really hard to keep them. It's unfortunate. So that's transpired into Grayson McCall hitting the portal today, CJ Beasley hitting the portal today, Jarrett Guest hitting the portal a couple days ago, and JT Killen hitting the portal. For McCall, it's really sad, but it was something I think all of us saw coming. A lot of us at the Keeping It Teal podcast off the air have talked about how we would love McCall to stay, but realistically, it makes the most sense to develop the quarterbacks we have as well as look into the portal for the future. Because regardless, McCall is down to his final year of eligibility with his COVID year upon transferring. So it's not like he would have any more time with us past next year. And I think we need to go into a new direction. I wish him nothing but the best, as I think we all do. And I'm excited to see where he plays next year. Really, like, it would be cool to root for Coastal, our team, and then root for McCall to get a Heisman. Like, I think we all want to see him go out on top. And sure, when he hits the NFL draft in 2025, I'm certain he's going to be labeled as a player of the team that he's graduating from. And hitting the NFL draft, but he will always be a Coastal quarterback. And I'll probably buy, or you know what, not probably, I'll definitely buy whatever NFL jersey is, even if it's a team that I'm not a fan of. So hey, that's exciting for him, but it's a somber day to be a Chant here on November 29th of 2023, seeing our NIL dissolved and multiple major key Chants hitting the portal. So that's enough for me before we get into our open discussion for this topic. Jay, what are your, I guess, thoughts and topics to discuss related to guys on our end entering the portal and the NIL collective?
I mean, it's just a sad day. NIL is a big thing in college athletics now. We're going to have to find a way to get a new one and get people to donate so that we can be our standard, which is the top of the conference like we were in 2020, and everybody knows what a Coastal Carolina Chanticleer is. Because if we don't, we're going to fall back behind and be just a regular team, which kids won't know about unless we recruit them out of high school. And with all these guys entering the portal, I mean, I hope they do well at their new schools, but it's what it is. What it is. It's the new era in college athletics. It's just something we got to get used to, and we got to retain the players that want to be there, and also the ones that we are recruiting in the transfer portal and also out of high school. AJ, what do you got about the portal?
Yeah, so kind of like you said, this is expected, every season that this is now college athletics, and people are going to move around, right? The portal always causes some ruckus around this time of year, but like you said, McCall, we said that we might see this one coming, and again, it's not a personal dig of the guy. Obviously, we love the guy, but this is just, it almost seems like it's the move that makes the most sense for Coastal football and for him as well, right? He still wants to pursue that Power Five dream. And for, like I said, Coastal football, right? Every year that he stays, right, other people hit the transfer portal and leave, right? People that they recruit in that they might believe in and want to take a shot on leave because they're gonna ride the bench, right? So it kind of makes the most sense for those two to part ways. Jarrett Guest, again, I think that was actually kind of a surprise for us. Not that it's something, and I'm not the biggest Jared Guest fan, so it's not something I'm too upset about personally. But it's still one of those things where it's like, we didn't really see that one coming. Again, we don't know where he's going to land. We don't know if it's going to be Power Five. Our guess would be more it's going to be another group of five where he'd get the job. But again, who knows with him? CJ Beasley, that's a big one, right? We have a really good running back room. I think we have one of the better group of five running back rooms in the country, if not the best. And this definitely takes a hit on that realm of things. Again, who knows where these guys wind up? And I guess there is always the shot they do come back, right? We've seen it happen before, Grayson and some others, where they go out there, they see what offers they could draw up, and then it's like, if they don't love them, they'll just come. They come back. Like I said, JT Killen Hurts, right? That is our defensive captain this year, one of two. So you're losing 2 captains to the transfer portal is never anything good. But that's just, again, unfortunately, that's how college athletics work. And speaking of it, right, that big driving factor is NIL. And now that this Teal Collective disbanding is a problem, right? I mean, I know that when it first happened, we were talking about how important it's been for this baseball program, their collective, as far as, right, drawing in transfers, drawing in guys for NIL. Because at the end of the day, right, there are other things you use to compare schools. But if I'm somebody that's picking between a couple schools, right, yeah, okay, campus life, okay, coaching staff, right, some of these other things, right, of as far as like where I'm looking to go play. But a huge driving factor, at least like 75% of it, is what else can you give me, right? Besides, okay, cool, I want to play for the school. I like this school. I like this coaching staff. I like the it's okay. Well, how much money are you giving me? What kind of brand? What kind of deals am I getting? This, that, and the other. And again, when a lot of these recruits now, or guys in transfer portal, are going to put Coastal and maybe some of these other group of, like, your App States, JMU's, Liberties, etc., on paper, and look at them all lined up, without a Teal Collective and without that same NIL push, right? Some of these other guys might look the other way, and that's gonna hurt our program as a whole. So I hope that there's a solution to this, and relatively quickly. But who knows what they might wind up being. But again, it's the NIL is the main. Unfortunately, it's the main driving factor in college athletics nowadays. Again, that collective is going to be a big part of that. I hate how it works. I hate especially how people announce going into the transfer portal before the season's over. I hate it so much. Because then guys sit out and it causes bad blood and it makes things awkward, right? And it kills morale. But that's the reality of what we live in. It's the wild, wild west out there. And it's adapt or die, right? Just like primetime Deion Sanders says, right? It's adapt or die. And it's just one of those things that we're gonna have to adapt to it if we want to stay relevant.
Yeah, absolutely, AJ. Those are all like really great points. You got to adapt or die, like Primetime said. It's unfortunate. This is the world we live in. I'm very grateful that we have a head coach who, at least from last year when we had NIL, proved that he can go out and get us ballers, and he kept guys like Jared Brown and McCall. We're now in a scenario where we need to keep Jared Brown. I mean, that was obviously going to be a given this offseason regardless, but without Grayson McCall, without CJ Beasley, we have some really good running backs still. We have some really good receivers, but more than likely, I would assume that Pinckney is going to hit the draft, and being a guy who holds an NCAA record all time, I'm certain this guy's going to get drafted fairly high. Bless him, because he'll have the Sean LeClaire name attached to him in his draft. So get to see a Coastal player get drafted, hopefully somewhere in the early rounds, is going to be very exciting for old man Sam, as some call him. But no, we really got to figure out this NIL stuff. And when I say we, I mean Sean LeClaire Nation, Teal Nation, Coastal Carolina football, Coastal Carolina athletics, Joe Moglia, etc. Call up your boys in the NFL. I know people have talked about Likely. Likely hasn't gotten his full-on NFL contract after 4 years. If he wants to help out, bless him. But I wouldn't ask a guy who's on a rookie contract to donate back. Wait until he gets that, sexy check from the Ravens after his 4 years are up, and then hit him up. But you still got guys like Josh Norman out there. Tolbert's been retired for a minute. I know he's sitting pretty on those fullback checks he's gotten from the Chargers and Panthers and everyone who he's played for. Yeah, Jerome Simpson, whatever he's doing out there these days, hit him up. There are Chants out there that have money, especially guys who played for that program and want to see it continue to succeed, especially because Simpson and Norman's names are attached to the field house. I would assume both of them would want to be involved. So hopefully something gets figured out real quick, because I'm going to tell you right now, listen, I love Coastal football. I'm going to support them. I'm going to be excited. But we got to be real at the Keeping It Teal podcast. If we aren't able to hit the portal really well like we did last year, give Vasco and Boda a quarterback to compete with, also someone who's a little bit older, like a junior, who can come in and teach them things that maybe McCall didn't teach them. I'm not saying McCall didn't teach them anything. McCall definitely did. That's a leader of men right there. But getting a different perspective from another veteran quarterback is going to very much help Vasco and Boda develop, and even another quarterback that we'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, no, it's brutal. It's brutal right now. We're going to be excited to see what the portal brings. We're in this portal taketh era right now where we're losing guys, and we're probably still going to lose some more. But sooner than later, on December 4th, when the portal becomes undergrad eligible to accept offers, we will be able to begin the giveth phase. So hopefully we got something planned out to offer these kids to get them to join. And if there was any coach to do it, coastal wise, Tim Beck makes the most sense. So, hey, I got faith and hope. Let's just get this NIL stuff figured out so Beck has something to work with when he's trying to convince these kids to come our way. And now we're going to move to the open discussion section of this. Gentlemen, I got a question to pose for y'all for our open discussion. Of the four major Chaunts we've discussed, obviously we all believe we expected McCall to leave. Who was the biggest surprise for each of you when they hit the portal?
I would say for me, it was running back CJ Beasley today. I mean, I would thought coming in next year with Reese White being out of eligibility, I could see him being our 1-2 punch with Braden Bennett, and that just shocked me today because I thought next year he would be in for a more heavier workload than he has in years past. AJ, who was your most surprised?
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think my biggest surprise was CJ Beasley. That was one I was not seeing. Like, I did not see coming at all. Like you said, I think he was a guy that would have been a fantastic piece to this puzzle in the upcoming year. But I'll, to also say another person that, again, I am extremely surprised by is JT Killen. Like I said, that is your defensive captain and someone that this team, relies upon. And to see him, just the way when you look at his look, he had the mullet, he had everything going. You knew this was a Conway guy, and then we should have known something was up when he got the buzz cut. We should have known something was up with that guy, and I guess none of us caught it. But like I said, just those two guys, I think for me are like the biggest surprise. Those were guys I did not see. We have, but off air throwing around a bunch of names we could see maybe leaving, or guys that have some incentive to leave, but those two guys were not on that list.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, now that we've talked a little bit about the transfer portal and the taketh of the transfer portal, as well as the NIL flop that we have at Coastal going right now, as well as surprises, we're going to transition over to our next segment, which is talking about the future. Obviously there's more stuff to come through commits, more stuff to come through, guys who are going to commit through the portal. Hopefully, even if we don't have NIL, that Tim Beck will work his magic. But let's talk about what we have right now. So when it comes to quarterbacks, that's the biggest piece for just about any team, especially a team like ours who looked inept on offense the last week of the season going into the bowl game. Obviously, McCall is gone, as we discussed in the previous segment, and Guest is pretty much gone as well, as confirmed to have hit the portal before McCall. We now have Vasco, who is most likely going to be our starter, assuming we don't get somebody through the portal to compete. But we also have Blake Boda, who was redshirted last year, who I think is a really great candidate to be the starting quarterback and could push Vasco for the starting spot next year, especially if we struggle to get a quarterback through the portal. Boda's a guy who originally was committed to UNLV, who just had a pretty damn good season over there. We haven't really got to see him play much, but in the short time that we got to see him play, he didn't look like he struggled at all. We had an offense in this season that just struggled entirely. We had some good drives that made us look like we could be balling out every game and putting up 30 points a game, but a lot of the games, a lot of the quarters, we struggled. In the ODU game, for example, that Vasco led us to victory. I mean, we looked pretty inept in the first half. So we got to stop looking inept, and maybe Boda's the answer to that. Our left arm quarterback. Who knows? I mean, we haven't got to see him play a half, a full quarter, or even a game. So, hey, let's see what Boda has next season. Let's see what Vasco has, and maybe, just maybe, we'll get a transfer. We also have DJ Moore Jr., who's another 3-star quarterback that we're going to have coming in the next year. Odds are he's going to get redshirted, so we probably won't see much of him. But hey, who knows what Beck has up his sleeves and his plans for a quarterback next year. But these are the three guys that we 100% know that we have that have the most talent at the quarterback position available on this roster. Now, potential. Could we get a 3 or 4 star transfer quarterback? Potentially. Without NIL, it really just comes down to you get to come in and be the starter, which would mean guys like Vasco and Boda wouldn't get a shot to be the starter. If we were able to get a guy without NIL, there's a good chance you're probably offering him the starting position. But who knows? I'm not there sitting in these calls that Beck and his staff are making to getting some of these guys to commit via the transfer portal. But it's something to look out for and something we'll discuss. So far in the transfer portal, we've seen damn near 100 quarterbacks hit the portal already. Now, as we discussed earlier in the pod, you can't commit to a team until December 4th unless you have grad eligibility. So if you're an undergrad, still like a freshman, sophomore, junior, etc., you don't get to commit until December 4th. But if you're, somebody like McCall with your, grad eligibility, the guy from Texas A&M, was it Max Johnson or something like that? He already committed to UNC that because he's a grad student, so he was able to, commit previous or prior to December 4th. But yeah, we'll have to kind of wait and see how it plays out. But the one guy that every Coastal fan on Twitter that I've seen has been speaking on is Mason Garcia, the ECU quarterback. ECU fans have raved about him. But for some reason, the staff benched him this year. I've been trying to listen to multiple different ECU podcasts to kind of get a vibe. No one really knows for sure why he got benched, or at least not the people that I've listened to so far. But let me tell you, and Jay can attest to this, this is a Conway kid who played for Carolina Forest. I don't know if his family still lives in the area, but assuming that they might, because he played at Carolina Forest, hey, the Conway kid could come back. This is a 4-star quarterback who committed to ECU and was 7th in his quarterback class of the guys when he was going into college as a freshman. On that list, number 2, CJ Stroud. He was 5 spots below CJ Stroud. So just kind of let that sink in for you. Who was 2 spots above him, guys? Carson Beck, the starter for Georgia. So that's the kind of guys that he's compared to, at least when he was coming into college as a freshman. So something to keep an eye out for. The rest of the quarterbacks, if I'm going to be real with you, some of the better ones out there are going to require NIL money. So if we're looking for a guy without NIL money and Beck can use his magic, it sounds like Mason Garcia is the go-to guy to get in the portal to compete with Vasco and Boda for the starting job next year. Jay, do you have any more information on, Mason Garcia, ECU, or Mason Garcia's potential of coming back to Conway?
Well, first off, I think Mason entering the transfer portal, I see him getting benched this year. I think he wants to go to his next school, come in little, show him why was so highly recruited come out of high school. He wants to make an impact, and also I think we have to put on the full court press to go and get him because he would be the perfect future. I mean, he's got 2 years of eligibility left, and the hometown connection, the hometown kid coming home. I know his family would like it, and I hope he would as well. And seeing him in the teal and black next year would be an ideal start because of his experience, and he's an older leader for the QB group with Vasco and Boda still underclassmen. AJ, what you got about the QB room?
Yeah, I mean, I think most schools actually would be fortunate and would actually like to be in our QB predicament. Like I said, yes, we are losing. Not many schools can lose both their starting quarterback and again the number 2 guy in the depth chart from this year, and still be in a pretty okay spot. Like we are. Like I said, I think Vasco, if he can develop and continue to learn, I know, like we said, the offense looked good at times, but also at other times was like, watching paint dry. But if he could, continue to develop and learn, he could be a decent piece. Like we said, Boda, I think, I know Hunter's big on him. I know that the kid, it's hard to tell when you haven't really seen him play, all that much, but I think he's a kid that could be capable of the job again, if he learns it. And then again, in today's society, it's adapt or die. You look at all the big schools that stay relevant and what do? they get somebody that transfers in that plays a year or two, and then they're done, and then they grab somebody else from the portal, right? That's just how it works. So I said there's this Mason Garcia guy who I know you two have been highly recommending might be the next guy here. I think competition's a good thing, right? As long as it's friendly competition, most people nowadays, though, again with the transfer portal, it's like, okay, there's somebody that's going to start over me, I'm going to leave. Which is not always the way to look at it. I think the big thing too is you always have to have a little bit of loyalty in the school that believes in you from the beginning, right? It's like, hey, these Power 5 schools didn't believe in you out of high school, so what makes you think that I don't know, there's no loyalty there. But it is what it is. And again, this is not the end, right? I think that's another thing too, is this might be what we think might be the option now, but every day more and more guys hit that portal. I think out of the Division One, probably like 75-80% of the quarterbacks are going to be hitting the portal, and then it's going to be a giant shuffling game, right? And it happens every year. Everybody shuffles around. We see it happening a lot with some of your Power 5 schools, but it's going to be that whole trickle down effect. Coaching changes happen, right? Then all of a sudden, with coaching changes comes personnel movement around, all these players moving around. It's going to be absolute hurricane. But again, I think it's definitely something to consider, right? Is it all starts with the quarterback room. And like I said, I'm actually okay with this quarterback room. And I think that this quarterback room is in a good spot. If we can continue to work on it. Like I said, it's going to be tough without NIL money and all the other stuff, right? That means the person really has to like the school. And there's very few people that might actually like it, or like Hunter was saying, you're probably going to have to promise them certain other things in order to get them to come here, which makes things harder, but it doesn't make things impossible.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be interesting to see how our quarterback room looks during spring ball. Once most of the transfer portal kind of dies down and you have more of an understanding of what the roster is going to look like when we're in spring ball. So yeah, no, I want to see how Vasco does in spring ball. I want to see how good Boda does. I want to see if we hear anything about DJ Moore Jr. And I'd love to see if we do have a transfer quarterback to compete with these gentlemen, who he is and what he brings to the table, especially with leadership if it's a junior or senior. So it's exciting, even though we're in a somber time, but we'll have more to talk about this going into the future. And let's shift focus on a new type of pick'em. But instead of pick'ems, we're doing bowl game predictions. So each of us gets 3 picks for where we think the bowl is going to be and who the opponent is. The way we have discussed as the Keeping It Teal podcast is, even if we predict which bowl it's going to be, if you didn't pick the team with it, it doesn't count. So you're only correct if you're 100% correct. If none of us are correct, and it is what it is. But we decided to give each other 3 opportunities because this is not a very easy thing to predict with all the different variables of who's eligible to go to what kind of bowl based on like what conferences go to what bowl, etc. So, hey, we're going to start with Jay's predictions. Jay, what is your number one prediction for what this bowl game will be?
First off, I think we're not going back to Florida. We're not going to the Myrtle Beach Bowl. So I'm going to say we're going to make our first trip for a bowl game to the great state of Alabama, and we're going to be in the Camellia Bowl against Eastern Michigan, a MAC opponent.
All right, who's your second prediction? If that doesn't happen, what is the second option?
I feel like one bowl game that we haven't gone to yet, I'm going to say we're going to go to FAU, the Boca Raton Bowl, and we're going to play the New Mexico State Aggies. I mean, they're 10-2. They just waxed Auburn, and there would be a very good bowl opponent for us to go up against to see how good we really are as a team.
Absolutely. The New Mexico State team is on a high right now. Especially if they beat Liberty. I would assume we probably wouldn't be playing it if they beat Liberty, but just like that's going to be a good team. I hope they compete really well. I know they lost to Liberty earlier in the year, but it will be interesting. And then, Jay, who's your final projection of what this bowl, where is this bowl game going to be and who are we playing? If those two don't come true, what's your final shot at getting this right?
I'm going to say we're going to be heading to the Big Easy for the first time, and we're going to be facing a very familiar foe and also coaching staff, and I see us facing off against Liberty in the New Orleans Bowl and hopefully getting revenge from the 2020 Cure Bowl that we had against them.
All right. In the closeout, Jay, out of these three, is your number one pick your favorite matchup, your most ideal one, or is that one, just the one that you think is most likely? And then second question, if it is not your favorite one, which one is the one that you really want to happen?
The one I really want to happen would be Boca Raton against New Mexico State. I mean, they're a very good opponent, and I want to see how well we match up against a team like them. But the obvious one I could see making sense would be Alabama. We haven't been to Alabama in our very short bowl postseason, and I could see us playing a MAC opponent, Eastern Michigan, who we've played before already.
All right. Thank you, Jay. Let's move on to AJ. Who is your number one bowl pick, and where's it going to be?
So my number one bowl pick here is I could see us going into the Birmingham Bowl versus a New York team in Syracuse. It's just one of those things where they put a Power 5 team that's average against us, see how it all shakes down. But I think that's probably number one for me.
All right. And then who's your number two if that first one doesn't pan out for you? What's your second shot at it?
If that one doesn't pan out, people are going to hate me if this actually comes true. But I could see us playing in the luxurious Myrtle Beach Bowl against the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers. Again, that one's not the most luxurious. People would probably hate us for that if it comes true. Again, just in reality, I'm going to go with that one.
Fun fact for y'all before we move on to AJ's third pick. Had Coach Chad Staggs not moved on to Georgia State, he was originally a linebackers coach at Western Kentucky after departing the Coastal Carolina staff. He was with them for a couple of weeks before Georgia State called him and brought him in as the D coordinator. So that this could have been an opportunity to face Chad Staggs in an alternate universe. But, that's just a little fun fact for you. All right, let's move on to three. AJ, what is your third shot at a bowl game, assuming your first two don't hit?
Yeah, so the third one for me is a little bit of a frisky one, the fun and frisky. I'm going with the Gasparilla Bowl against the University of South Florida Bulls. I think that's an interesting one for me and a fun one for me. I think that's a solid three right there.
All right, and the closeout the same way we did with Jay, is your number one pick the one that you feel like is most likely to happen? And if so, which is the one that you would most like to happen if in an ideal world you got to pick it?
Yeah, so the one I think again is most likely to happen is that Myrtle Beach Bowl. Again, I would hate for that to happen. I would find that as a cop out. But I find that one as the most obvious answer. I also could see the Birmingham Bowl happening. I think that's another one that's could easily happen, especially with Syracuse again being like an average team. And I could see us going back to the Birmingham Bowl for a second year, just like how you have the Cure Bowl. You just going back to it. I can see us just throwing us back in the Birmingham Bowl again, with us going there last year. But the one I would think is the frisky fun, the one I would actually, if I got to pick it, would pick, I'd pick that Gasparilla Bowl. Great name, great location. I think USF's actually probably the best matchup for us. If we play Western Kentucky, I think we get beat. And if we play Syracuse, again, they've been a not so great team, but they're still a Power 5 team, and I think we get smoked. So I think USF would actually be the best matchup for us on top of, it's a new bowl game for us, fun name, all that other stuff. So that's what I'm going with.
And to go off of what AJ said, I'm not going to fault him for saying that we're probably going to get smoked in the bowl game. Because we want to win this bowl game, but what's got to change is we got to run our offense completely differently than we've run it in the last 2 weeks where we looked at App. So either Trickett has to go or Trickett has to completely change his offense for the bowl game. And I want to see a different vibe out there. I know Vasco can come out and he can play fairly well, but it just did not look good for him in that JMU game. I want to see what Boda has. I really want to see what Blake Boda has. At least give him half the game. At least give him half the game. So let's move on now to my picks. My number one, I have us going back to the Cure Bowl. I think it's just a safe bet that the Cure Bowl would probably be the location that the selection committee would probably try to put us versus USF. They've had an all right season. I think the game that everybody probably thinks of most when it comes to USF this year was the fact that they almost beat Alabama at home. Alabama rarely travels on the road to a group of 5 opponent, and they did this year, and it was a very close, low-scoring game. This is a team that can compete. The defensively in some of the games, specifically that one, they looked really good. Similar to us, right? We've had a couple of games where our defense has looked really good, but in a couple of games where our defense has not looked existent. So I think this is probably the most even matchup that we would have based off of how our team played in the last 2 weeks. Now, had we had beaten JMU in a close one and beaten Army in a close one, we'd be talking a little bit differently right now. But because of how our teams played in the last 2 weeks, as well as multiple leaders hitting the portal and like 99.9% likely not to play in this game, I think our best bet of winning would be a Cure Bowl versus USF. Now we move on to my second pick, the famous Toastery Bowl versus Utah State. Famous Toastery Bowl, Jay Largent. It's in Charlotte, ain't it? Or it's in Carolina?
It's in Charlotte. It's Charlotte 49ers Stadium because of it was supposed to be the Hawaii Bowl, and they're going under renovations and also the devastation they've had, so they moved it to Charlotte this year.
Thank you, Jay. Yeah, not too far away from Coastal. Gives people a chance who haven't been up to Charlotte to check it out, and those who have been to Charlotte, hey, Charlotte gets a bowl. It'd be fun. I'd probably attend this game if it was the famous Toastery. I don't live too far away from Charlotte. I know Mr. J. Largent also doesn't either. Maybe we could try to get AJ to fly out and we do our first in-person podcast at the bowl game. I don't know. That would be probably my favorite. Utah State has had a decent year. They're not a team that I'm really scared of, but they're not a bad team either. So that I like another bowl game where we have a fairly even matchup to have fun and have a chance at winning. Because right now, if you don't know, in our 3 years of bowling, we're 1-2. I'd rather not go 1-3 in bowling. I'm not saying I don't have confidence in our team. I love our team. If we could beat a crazy good team, that would be freaking awesome. It's just with the way things have been going, our offense has to do a complete 180 in a 2 to 3 week span, however long it's going to take until we actually play our bowl game. And my final pick is hey, if we're going to play a tough opponent, I know a lot of people are taking liberty. I'm going to take a different page out there. Who's a group of 5 team that I would like to pick a fight with? Not to say that we have any beef with them, but just like I would love to see our team play them. Bowl games are usually for opponents you don't regularly play, is usually how the matchups are tried to be made. I would love to see us in the Camelo Bowl, I believe Jay said, in Alabama versus Toledo. There's a lot of shots at a Sunbelt team versus a MAC team playing in this bowl game. And I think Toledo is one of the best group of 5 teams, very slept on this year, very slept on. One of their first games of the season, they were very close to beating Illinois, who's a fairly decent, about average level team, especially in the Big Ten. But that's still a Big Ten team full of 4-star players, and they almost beat them. And then after that, they went on a ride where they only lost one more game of the season. They had a 2-loss season, I believe, if I'm not wrong there. But yeah, overall, they're a very good team in the MAC, and they are in the MAC Conference Championship. Am I right, guys? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry, y'all. I didn't put notes on for Toledo's season when I did this bowl pick. But yeah, no, they're a 2-loss team in the conference championship for the MAC. Could be the MAC winners. I would love to play them. I think that'd be fun. Could we get stomped by them? Listen, we are keeping it teal here. There is potential, especially after losing our veterans, some of our veterans on the team. But I think we have a shot. Change up the offense. We could compete against a team like that. So that is my ideal, that's my ideal bowl game for if we could play a top opponent. But my most likely one is the Cure Bowl versus USF. And my favorite one would be a bowl game in Charlotte, close to home, versus Utah State, Jordan Love's college team. For those of y'all who don't know any players who played for Utah State, that's the only one I can think of. So there you go. Those are our bowl game predictions. We are not changing them. So when the bowl games are announced here in a couple, I believe next week or so, we'll on a later podcast discuss, hey, was any of us right? Was one of us close? Did we get the opponent correct but the wrong bowl game, or the correct bowl game but not the right opponent? Who knows? We'll discuss, and we'll see how close we were. It's going to be exciting. We're once again, all of our pick'ems are bragging rights. We don't have any trophies right now. We have a metaphorical crown that was given to AJ for both of his victories earlier in the podcast for the Sunbelt pick'ems and the Sunbelt Championship pick'ems. But yeah, no, a metaphorical crown, an imaginary crown will be given to the guy who gets the bowl. Maybe it's a bowl. Maybe we give them an actual bowl. I don't know. We'll see. But now let's shift over towards our last two segments with the Keeping Up with the Chants with AJ and Jay to tell us a little bit about how the other coastal athletic programs have been doing. Gentlemen, take it away.
Obviously, our volleyball team, they found out last Sunday night that they'll be heading to Knoxville, Tennessee for the first round of the NCAA tournament. And I actually left today, so we'd like to wish good luck to the volleyball team as they will be playing in the first round of the NCAA tourney Friday against Western Kentucky at 4:30 in Rocky Top, Tennessee.
All right, sticking to the hardwood floor here. We're going to go with the basketball teams. Women's basketball beat UNCW, but they lost to UNC Greensboro actually tonight when we were filming this on Wednesday night. Next up, they have College of Charleston on Saturday. Then they play the Crimson Tide of Alabama on Wednesday. That'll be an interesting one. If you want to watch one of those top matchups. So women's basketball is 4-3. And again, we haven't gotten into conference play yet, so we'll see how that stuff shakes up. And the men's basketball team, Firecliff Ellis, redo the HTC Center, and more. Surprisingly, somehow, by some miracle, they beat USC Upstate tonight in overtime, 72-70. That means they are 2-4, and in their 2 wins against not so great programs, they have won by a total of 4 points. One like Division III team and USC Upstate. So that just shows you how good this team really is, or what they're really made of. And now they face their longtime rival Winthrop on Saturday. Again, we'll see how that one happens. And then they have St. Andrews on Monday. Listen, I'm not a betting man, but if I was, hammer the money line for St. Andrews. It might not be pretty again. And I criticize our men's basketball team a lot just because I care about the school. And I think that when you line up all the programs, the program that needs the most attention, needs the most work is the men's basketball, and I guess women's basketball program as well. So that's why I lay into them so much. But yeah, there's a lot. There's a long season ahead. Conference play still ahead. Listen, the men's basketball could go 0 and whatever in non-conference play, and then win out in conference play, and it doesn't matter. Or you lose out for the rest of the season, but you show up at the conference tournament and beat everybody, and then you make March Madness. So it doesn't really matter. But this is just currently what our winter sports, if you will, are up to.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for the update on what our Coastal Carolina athletic programs, other than our CCU football team that we regularly cover, are up to. Hey, I'm not going to jump into any of that. It's exciting to see what our volleyball team is doing right now, and we really hope something will turn around for our basketball team. But until then, fire Cliff Ellis. All right, let's transition over to our last segment of the day. We're going to have AJ kind of explain what the future of the Keeping It Teal podcast will look like for, spring and summer, before we get back to the football podcast that you know and love towards the end of the summer, beginning of the football season next year. One thing that I'll mention before AJ kind of jumps into it is I'm still going to be involved. If you don't see me as much, it's just because spring's not looking too hot for me. And I know these two gentlemen here on my left and right are very knowledgeable of the other athletic programs at our school, and they're going to continue to keeping it teal at the highest level possible of content. So I'm excited to see how that goes. But AJ, take it away, discussing what the future of Keeping It Teal looks like for spring semester.
Thank you, Hunter. As you have said, you may be wondering what's going to happen after football season, considering this podcast has basically been all about football and then shining a little bit of light on some of the other sports. Well, don't you worry, my friends. Don't you get upset, right? Just because football season might be ending does not mean this podcast is going to go, cold turkey for 6 months, whatever it is. How it's going to kind of shape up is obviously we will wait till all your bowl games and stuff kind of conclude as coastal football season concludes. Right, we'll wait till that kind of happens. Once that happens, we'll probably go to bi-weekly because again, like we've talked about, basketball teams are not very entertaining to talk about. There's nothing really much to talk about with those teams. So we'll still highlight them as per usual, but they'll probably go back to, bi-weekly with talks of, all right, how's our basketball doing? Also maybe some football, some transfer portal updates, right? What's going on there in the off season. And then we will pick things back up to weekly come baseball season, which starts mid-February. They released their schedule today. Again, Jay and I will break that down, as we get close to that season. We'll go over the schedule, players to watch, right? What our new roster looks like. As Hunter alluded to, not that we're kicking the guy out. He's not here, so I could say this. We're not kicking him out or anything, but all right, maybe it might be here. But he's not the as baseball minded as Jay and I are, and he has a busy spring schedule, so he will not be in attendance for all the ones in the spring. He'll be there, here and there, maybe giving us some transfer portal updates, whatever he's got. But it might be more of Jay and I. But again, don't you worry, right? We will still have podcasts. We will still be taking care of everything. And again, you best believe, right? Gillies last year, this baseball team's going to come in hot, and we're going to break it down for you, and we're going to be on top of it every step of the way.
Like as Legacy 14 is, it's the man that put us on the map, Gary Gilmore's final season. We're going to do our best to highlight the godfather of our university who put us on the map and given us everything to what is known as we walk around our home states. So as we're traveling across the nation, everybody knows what a Coastal Carolina Chanticleer is because of Gary Gilmore and his staff for what they did in 2016 for us and changed our university forever.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. And thank you, AJ, for kind of giving the audience an idea of what the podcast is going to look like. No, I'm not being kicked out. And no, I'm not walking away. I'm just being honest, ladies and gentlemen. I never played baseball, never played basketball. While I was a sport management major and have gotten a lot closer to learning more about these sports, baseball is one of my favorite sports to watch outside of football and lacrosse these days. I love watching our Chants. However, I'm not one of the type of people who's dedicated to watching every single game of our program. Shame on me, I guess. I just don't have the time to watch tons of baseball games. But if I'm going to watch a baseball game, it's going to be Coastal over MLB. That's just who I am. That's how much passion I have for this Coastal baseball program. That was the only sports program I even knew about when I was going to Coastal Carolina as a freshman. Because our football program back then, at least, at the beginning of our transition to the FBS level, wasn't something to really talk about. But hey, I'm excited to see where this goes. I'm excited to talk about our Chanticleer baseball team with the guys after they kind of get me more informed about what the roster's looking like next year. I'm not going to try to jinx anything, but if we were making the playoffs, which I would really think that we should be, I'm excited to watch those because I've watched every single playoff game for our Coastal baseball team within the last 2 years. And I would like to keep that streak going for me to kind of show I'm getting a lot more involved. And hey, listen, when it comes to basketball, I would love for our men's basketball team to, have a shot at March Madness. But unfortunately, with Cliff Ellis right now, I don't even think that's even in remote consideration, especially with what the guys have been breaking down for you. So, we'll see what we're talking about. But yes, I'm going to be covering a lot of transfer portal stuff with the guys as well. They're going to have information on it too. But please follow our Twitter/X account, Keeping It Teal, where I'm going to have the most up-to-date portal announcements. Maybe a couple minutes after it's announced, I'm just going to post Grayson McCall has hit the portal, blah, 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 blah. So if you want a constant update on who's leaving and who's coming in for our Coastal football program, give us a follow over on Twitter and X. So yeah, no, I'm excited to see where this goes, excited to see where the pod goes, excited to see where our bowl game is, who we're playing, and see what happens there. I really want our Coastal football team to be 2-2 in 4-year span of bowl eligibility. So we'll see. Other than that, it's been fun. It's been a great episode 7. Had a lot to talk about. I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about next week. Thank you for listening to our latest episode of the Keeping It Teal podcast. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube, X, Instagram, and Spotify to keep up to date with all things Teal. Until next time, good night, Teal Nation.